I also had some really wonderful friends later on, like not that I've met probably about 10 years ago, that really helped me push. Like the idea of calling myself an artist was just something I could not do for the longest time. I'd be like, I make things, but that's not really like who I am, you know? It's just like, oh, that's crazy. So I had some beautiful friends who helped me like really like stretch me outside of my comfort zone and like would be like, no, like say, what are you? And I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm an artist.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by BooklingMedia, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales. Hello, you are listening to the Origins of Creativity podcast. I am your host, Becky Gehrisch. In today's episode, we meet an artist who brings glass to life through passion, discipline, and play, revealing both the craft's challenges and its growing recognition as a respected art form. Today's guest is a stained glass and mosaic artist with a background in architecture. Her work is all about bringing the outside in and turning overlooked materials into striking art. With 12 plus years in stained glass and a practice that spans ceramics, metal, and natural elements, she invites us to see everyday beauty with fresh curiosity. Welcome to the show, Brielle Griffin.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. I've been looking at your pieces on Instagram and just they're beautiful. The stained glass pieces, the nature, there's butterflies, there's pumpkin pie, there's all kinds of fun, creative pieces. And I'm just so excited to get to talk to you about your creativity and what inspired you. So I guess to begin, I find it really interesting that you have a background in architecture. So how did that lead you to stained glass and mosaic work?
Well, I can't say that I saw that coming for sure. I grew up in a very small town in New Mexico. And so, I mean, that was a town where like the idea of like doing art was like not even like fathomable. You know, there's not a whole lot of art out there to begin with. There was like an art class that like I didn't take until my senior year. I just went like, you know, like why not? Because it was really like more of a class that you took if you wanted like an easy A or any that kind of thing. But like, yeah, and I was very into school at the time. I have a very type A mother. And I got that from her. So I was very driven at that point. And I was like, I'm not gonna spend time doing art because that's silly. I'm gonna put all of my efforts into schoolwork and getting the next step. And so when I got into college, at that time, they made you choose a major. I wasn't allowed to like choose undecided, which you can do now, which is kind of crazy. So at that point, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I like art and I like math. And that's kind of about as much as I knew about architecture. It was like, well, I think both of those things are part of that. So I just chose architecture. And then luckily the first year of architecture school is really like an art class. So it's like delineation and watercolor and a whole bunch of like that kind of thing, which I loved. And so I was like, this is great. I got in and then it became this whole crazy, I mean, talk about like a whole mind shift from where I'd come to like, I had really interesting professors that really like challenged the way you like view the world. So not at one point in my architecture degree did I actually design a building.
Oh, okay.
Which sounds crazy. Yes, exactly. So yeah, it was very interesting. And so when I graduated, I was going to move up to New York City because I graduated top. I was going to go to grad school. I was going to work there for a little bit. That was right in 2007. And so that's when the market kind of crashed. And so everyone was just laying off everybody. And so instead of going up to the job that I had planned on doing, I ended up getting a couple of like retail jobs at the time. And that was kind of the real transition because architecture school is an incredibly competitive, really a grueling school. If you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, when I got to New York and I wasn't in that, it was just like this heavy like sigh of relief. I was like, oh wow, I hadn't really allowed myself to pause at any point from like high school to then. And I got a job working retail, and I was doing like installations and that kind of thing for like, like entries to things. But I loved it because it was hands on, and I was allowed to like do visual stuff, and it was very creative, and I kind of got free reign with that. And I was like, oh, wow. I had been like in front of a computer for so long that I hadn't really been able to like use my hands and be creative in that way. And so that was really like the first transition from like the academic world, maybe a little bit, especially because at that point, like in architecture, you're told like anything that's not like functional is just dumb, really, right? Like it's not like, it's like a craft, but it's not to be taken seriously, that kind of thing. And so I got there. My ex-boyfriend got into Rice in Houston, and that's how I ended up moving to Houston, and still was working in lots of design related fields. I did some interior design for a little while. I worked for a remodeling company. So I've always kind of been in some kind of design based field. And then one Christmas, I went home, and sitting at the table with my family, my dad out of nowhere goes, I'd really love to learn how to do stained glass. Don't have any idea where it came from. That's the first and only time he mentioned it. He never did anything with stained glass, but it like sparked that little thing, talk about like planting a seed. And I went back to Houston and started watching some videos, eventually just bought a kit. And I was like, well, I'll just see if I can figure out how to do it. So at that point I looked up and I couldn't find classes near me. And I was like, well, I've always suffered from that, like, well, how hard could it be mentality. So yeah, I got it. I got the kit started. I mean, it was much more difficult than I anticipated. Shocking. Typical me. But yeah, then and started teaching myself. And that was about probably 10 years ago, 2014, however long ago that was.
So that's an interesting backstory of how things in our world changes your plans. Like you were talking about in 2007, how things shifted with, it's kind of hard to get a job in architecture or anything at that point. And when you were younger, you were talking about your mom and how you were a really good student. And I'm curious how you were as a kid. Like, what were you playing with? What were you exploring? If you guys were both, working on school projects, were you finding creative outlets that way at all? Or were you just more like focused on studies?
I would say like, I think there were hints of it when I was younger. So when I was really younger, I was definitely into like the craft things that you get, like make your own bracelets and like learn to like crochet. And like, I always probably got those kinds of things for Christmas. So it was like always right there. But then as I got a little older and like school became more important, like probably all that kind of went to the wayside. So really it was just very driven by academics at that point in my life.
Yeah, and you said you were really, of course, into math, and that's sometimes not the story for creatives, right? A lot of us are
Absolutely.
just like, math, keep me away,
Yes, which ironically is more who I am now. My husband is the math guy. I've never been able to do it well in my head. So yeah, like I could do it if I could write it out in front of me, but to do anything in my head is a trick. So
Oh, that's interesting though. Like, yeah, two sides of the brain though,
yeah.
kind of finding something and just choosing architecture. I mean, I think that's kind of funny. My daughter's 12 and she loves art, and we were like, well, maybe and she likes to build like buildings, I'm thinking, well, maybe architecture, but she hates math. So it's just like,
Yeah.
at 12 it might change.
I
But
mean, that was my idea of what architecture would be. There's very little math involved. So, I
okay,
mean, yeah,
yeah.
that's more the engineering side, I think. So, like,
So it could be still a thing with design.
exactly.
That's funny. And do you incorporate like any of the architecture knowledge? Like, how do you incorporate that at all? I'm sure you do into your pieces now, like structure and build. Like, I can just kind of see it in your pieces that like what you're doing with that back end of things.
Sure. I think like for architecture, especially, I mean, there's such an attention to detail that's required. It's such a driven field. And so I think that's really probably from an architecture to stained glass, what has really come along. Yeah, I think I'm looking at the stained glass piece and I mean, just like my ability to like look at things like in a different way, maybe looking at something you wouldn't necessarily think like stained glass is like part of what I do. But I mean, I also just love like, I'm working with metalwork right now. I got ceramics going. I mean, I'm always kind of like trying to figure out how one could play with the other a little bit.
Right. And did you say you had a brick and mortar studio?
So we have a house and then we have a detached garage apartment. And when we moved in, it was in really rough shape. It became like a, should we tear it down or should we try to fix it up kind of thing? And the beauty is, I married a man who loves a project just as much as I do. And so we both like immediately went into it going like, all right, what are we going to do? And so we both decided we were going to like fix this place up, but like ourselves. So little by little.
So there you're incorporating it there again.
Exactly. So there's a little bit, again, of the architecture, which has really come in handy with the build out of like, I have the downstairs, which is my studio where I do all my work. And then upstairs, we've converted into a gallery. So that's where all the pieces are. That's where I'm at right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Exactly. Displayed.
And so how is your business side of things? Like, is this something that people commission you to make pieces? Do you sell them locally? How does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of what I do right now is commission based, and it's usually through word of mouth. Instagram has been a huge platform for like getting things out there. I think that's how it started. As an introvert, I was not the first person to be like, "Hey, here's all the stuff that I've made." In fact, I was at one of my old jobs. I was doing this. I bought the kit. I told nobody, not even my family, that I was doing this, and I was like making pieces. And at a certain point, I had stuff like I'd made enough, and I was like, I don't really know what to do with these. And so I just opened an Etsy shop on the side. I was like picking a name and I was like, I don't know what I should call it and want to be my name. So I chose Hambone, which actually was a nickname my grandfather gave me when I was little because I was very goofy. And so he would always be like, she's such a hambone. And
Oh,
my parents gave me a hard time for the longest time because I guess I was at an age where he would call me that and then I adopted it. So then when people would ask me what my name was, it would be Hambone.
oh.
Hambone Rouse, which is my maiden name. So yeah, that was just the first thing that stuck out. So I named it that, and then it's kind of stuck. So it's it's still that today. There's been a few times I'm like, should I change it? And I was like, no, we love it.
No,
So
right. It's
yeah,
unique. It's yours. Oh, that's
right,
awesome. Oh, I
yeah.
love it. And so in a typical workday, are you doing just the commission work? Are you playing with new projects around the same time? Like how are you organizing everything?
Yeah. How do I juggle? Yeah, I mean, I kind of try to separate my day out like morning and afternoon. So I'm definitely working on something all day, but usually I try to work on like the commission stuff for a good chunk of the day, and then maybe for a few hours in the afternoon I work. So I'm trying to get better at fusing. I got a kiln, and so working on all of that. I've been making some bowls and some like coasters and that kind of lovely thing. They're a little more functional to bring it back to the architecture, which is
Right.
yeah, fun. Yeah. Which has been fun. Or like clay. Again, I was luckily gifted a kiln a while back. And so, yeah, or working on that or some like metal work. Me and my husband decided we would try our hand at, because he grew up working for his family business, which was building ambulances. So he
Oh,
was
wow.
I know, so he was good with he can like weld and do all kinds of things. So we've kind of like tried to put our talents together on a few things that's coming in the future, I think.
Right. And it sounds like you've got so many different um, outlets and ways to explore these different mediums. And so I think that's really cool to kind of see what else you can do with all the space, the space and the gallery, what you could have there. So that's really fun to have all of the different pieces and types of art. Because you said metal and so you've got the natural elements too. So you've got some pieces that have nature sculpted and different things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is about and how it came to be?
Oh man, I think like the place that I'm most happy would always be somewhere in nature. Like I would be in a mountainside every single day if I could be. But
Yes.
so I mean, I think that's just where I feel like most grounded. It's most inspired. Is like anytime that I'm feeling a little like I don't know stuck or like not sure, like you get stuck in those ruts sometimes as an artist, and like anytime I go back into nature, usually a mountain will do it for me. And I mean, I'm always taking like the whole downstairs gallery is just like this collection of like random, I don't know, things you would find on a mountainside. And those are the biggest inspiration for me. I have a whole lamp, a ceramic lamp that I've coated in actual, like I took apart a pine cone and like coated the whole thing with these little pine cone thing seeds, pods. And yeah, it's created this really beautiful, but also kind of dangerous. You have to be careful when you're
Sharp.
when you're moving it. Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. To the point where like I will have neighbors and friends and family members who now will like be somewhere, which I love, and they'll be like, I saw this weird pod and I thought of you. And so I brought it back. And I mean, it's usually things I've never seen. And they're like, well, I'm not creative at all. And I'm like, well, the fact that you saw that and you thought of me makes it clear that you can see these things in the same way. Yeah, which is beautiful.
I think you struck a chord right there with me saying that it was those pieces that they're finding are, they resonate with them and you, and that they can see it too. When you were young, were you collecting things or seeing things in nature, or has it just always been something that you're just very, so obviously, you said detail oriented, but like you're noticing these things about nature that you're wanting to keep because of the beauty or the feelings, how is that?
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, I think that was always there also in nature. Like, again, my parents had no idea. They were always kind of rolling their eyes like, oh, here she goes again with another rock. But I was gifted like a rock tumbler by my aunt when I was
oh,
little. So that's always been there for sure. But I mean, even I think me and my husband took our first trip. It was before we were married to Vermont. We have a friend that has a place up there. And I mean, we were walking out and things. And I've never seen like the bark on some of these trees is like gold and glistening. And I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. And it was like falling off because it was almost winter. And so I'm like taking the bark and like collecting all the bark and bringing it back to the cabin. And then we found this big, long, almost, it's like a log, but very long. It was not going to fit in our suitcase. And so I was just like, we've got to get this home. And he's just like, I don't think we're going to get this home. But he found they actually had like a saw in the basement. So he goes and he cuts this thing into 3 pieces. We've like emptied out. I left my snowshoes at this cabin so that I could take this wood
oh my
back
gosh.
home. And so we get it, we put it in the thing, we get to the airport. And of course, this is me at any place we travel ever. We build in time for my suitcase to get pulled to the side because absolutely that thing gets pulled to the side. But at this
What
point,
is this piece of,
yeah, absolutely.
tree?
And I mean, at that one, they start calling other people over, and there's more security coming over. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, they're sticks, basically, they're locks, but like they're like, no, this is a weapon. Like you have a weapon. I'm like, I mean, I don't know if that classifies, but yeah, we were not allowed. We had to go back through all of security and check the bag because it was not allowed on the carry-on
I
at
love
that point.
that.
But yeah, usually rocks will do the same thing. There's just big
Right.
masses that it's like, what is that?
Oh,
But
that's
yeah.
so funny. Sometimes I'll ask, guests if, there was anything that got them in trouble with, their art. And this is
Yeah.
the perfect example of something
Yes.
like that where, oops, it's it's a weapon. I've got this stick or I've got this, which is interesting. You are collecting these things. Did you ever keep a sketchbook, or is that, because I know people will go out into nature, they'll sketch the tree, they'll sketch the rock. And it's so interesting. I'm feeling like I could probably be more like you, where I'm like, I take the little piece, so I have that memory, but a lot of people will sketch. So I just wonder if that's something you don't probably need to do since you've got the pieces.
No, I've never really not sketched. I sketched probably like in architecture school because that's kind of part of that first year, but not since then. Again, I tend to like want to take those actual things back. And then like most of the time people are like, what are you going to do with it? And I genuinely, I'm like, I don't know yet, and things will sit for a couple years before something's like, oh, okay. I know what that's like. I know what that's for now. I have the perfect thing for this piece that I'm working on. Like all those pods will come back out.
Right. And so your stained glass pieces, do you design those based on things you found at all in nature? Or is it just kind of like a side by side kind of thing together? They just kind of exist. But I'm just wondering, because you've got like butterflies or the butterfly wing. Did you ever like have pieces like that kind of led you to do a piece?
Oh, for sure. Definitely. That's why, like, I think almost everything that I make is nature based. I mean, there's always obviously the smaller pieces like the pumpkin pie that
Yes.
you mentioned early on that are just for fun because and usually like for every like big serious commission I make, then I'll like take them again. That's just part of it. I'll take a minute and make something just for fun. That's just kind of silly. That would be fun hanging in a window. So there's again that balance so that it's not taxing.
My question, I guess, to that is the commission pieces, you enjoy them. Do you find them as, fulfilling as things that you would just randomly pick for fun or things that you want to do? How is that when it comes to commission work?
I mean, they're definitely fulfilling. I think there's a little more pressure to get it right because like somebody's already expecting something. Where if I'm just making something for myself and somebody sees it and loves it, it's like, well, that's already the finished piece. So I already know you love it because you've decided that you like it. But like when they're waiting on a piece, then you're always hoping that you're going to get it right, like how they envision it in their head. But yeah, they're both definitely rewarding in just different ways. I try to balance that out. So I'll always make something just for me that I've been wanting to make for a long time. Like I have a piece you may have seen that's like a giant bird's nest,
I love that.
which is an idea I had for a really long time. But in my head, I was like, I have no idea having to like actually make all of those little twigs out of glass work. And so it's not something I would have chosen to do as a commission because I wouldn't have felt confident enough that I could execute it well. But like when I'm doing it just for me, then it's just like, well, if it's a flop, it's a flop and it
Right,
doesn't
you've
matter.
experimented
Yes.
and played with that idea, and then now you can, be confident that you can do it again, or
Absolutely.
and I think that's definitely something that is important, and sounds like it is for you to be able to play and be able to explore what you want to do, and I think that's really fun. I did notice, and I was just kind of looking through your Instagram, and there was you have some really good descriptions of what you're doing in the post, and you had quoted Elsie DeWolf, and it said, "I'm going to make everything around me beautiful. That will be my life." And I know that you had said something about that you wish that was for you. Do you feel like that is definitely how you're approaching things and how you apply that to your art at all?
No, absolutely. I think
Okay.
that's how I play everything in my life. I think I try to do that. Even like our home, like I look at it as a little art box. And so, yeah, I like slowly building out like glass in all the windows. And, it's this thing where people kind of stop and they go like, whoa, because that's just for me, something I'm always striving to do. Just make something.
Were there things in your youth that were just really, books, movies, in nature, beside, we talked about nature, but things that were just beautiful that you just connected with, that you just felt like you had to make beautiful things? You know what I mean? Like, not everybody is an artist. Not everybody is trying to capture that. And I'm just curious if there's anything that you can remember that would have struck a chord with you. And it obviously sounds like nature, but I'm just thinking, like,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. I also had some really wonderful friends later on, like not that I've met probably about 10 years ago that really helped me push like the idea of calling myself an artist was just something I could not do for the longest time. I'd be like, I make things, but that's not really like who I am, It's just like, oh, that's crazy. So I had some beautiful friends who helped me like really like stretch me outside of my comfort zone and like would be like, no, like say, what are you? And I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm an artist. I'm an artist. So there were definitely things. I mean, they were a huge impact in my life. And obviously nature. I mean, again, when I was younger, there wasn't a whole lot of that like in my mind. Like I would have never, if you had told me I am where I am today when I was young, I would have been like, no way. Yeah. So it's very different.
yeah, that's such an interesting, shift. Or like so many artists will say, there were things that really, since they were little, they were always drawing or whatever it was. And I just think it's so cool that you found your vision, you found kind of who you are, and you are an artist, now, and how you got there. And I think it's a kind of a reminder that you don't have to be, you can be any age to try something new and get to a point where you are you are the artist and you are doing these beautiful things. So I think that's such a great reminder to so many people who, don't necessarily have that background or, they've always been doing it, but it's fine. And I think adults have a hard time trying that. And then,
Absolutely. The amount of people, I mean, my family, my parents, my family, who are actually quite artistic will be like, oh, no, I don't have an artistic bone in my body. And I'm like, look at this beautiful wreath you do. I mean, they do artistic things, but again, there's this weird mindset where it's like, oh, no, I'm not that. I don't have that ability. And it's like, yes, you do. I think we all do. It's just like whether or not we've practiced it. Because really, it is a practice. Like nobody's good at anything I mean, I guess there's a few savants out there, but that's rare. But yeah, I think practice is key, really.
yes, it really is. And so many people think, oh, wow, you're so talented. And it is the work, it's maybe that obsession, maybe that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, that,
I was gonna say there's some passion also.
yeah,
I
the
like the word
passion,
passion.
yeah, passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be, yeah. The passion is what I think what would drive, us to want to do the things that we do. And I love that.
Yeah, and I think a willingness to fail is a huge part of it too. Like you're gonna fail more times than you succeed. That's just part of growth and getting better at anything. And I think a lot of times people like if they're not good at it right away, it's just like, well, I just can't do this. It's like, wow, keep at it a little bit longer. If you like it, you're probably gonna get a lot better at it. So I guarantee you will.
Yes, yes. So many, kids that I talk to I can't do that, or I don't know what I'm doing. And it's that interesting age shift at some point in like second grade where they compare themselves to others, or they, just assume that they are not that, and, or they can't do it. And, it's hard to, especially with kids who, short attention spans, or,
Yeah.
they don't want to sit down and actually spend the time to or practice or work at something unless they don't think of it as work. As soon as they just do it, they just do it. They're fine. But to have that reminder, just start today. It's kind of like one of those, planting a tree. It'd be better to, when's the best time to plant a tree is like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So just start today. Start playing with it.
The seed, yes.
So when you're making your pieces, are there, is there anything, if it was commission piece or your own piece, is there anything that's just kind of like going on in the back of your mind about, working with the glass or mosaic? Like, is there anything that's just floating through your mind as you work on things?
I think my favorite thing about working on the glass and doing that in general is I'm not thinking about anything. Like I put headphones on. Sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's music, and sometimes it's just like noise canceling and there's nothing. But I am rarely thinking about anything. I'm not, and it's this beautiful like ability to kind of zone out and just like let my hands and like, my eyes, all of that just kind of flow together. And I'm not having to think about it. And I think that's when like the most beautiful pieces come about. If I try to make something that I think others will like, it's usually, 99% of the time it's going to be a flop. And it's like, oh, well, nobody's loving it like I thought. I hope they would. But if I make something for me that's just coming out of me, that's usually the things that like resonate with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really try. If I get into a thing where I'm overthinking it, I will usually stop and move on to something else and come back to it.
Smart.
Yeah, that's usually, especially like trying to pick out colors. And, with the glass, I work on a light box. But that's not how it's gonna like eventually gonna be displayed. Obviously, the sun. So lighting plays a huge part, and every single time the outcome is different than what I would have guessed it would have been. So it's always a little bit of a surprise, and I love that element too. Like when it's held up, I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that part to be quite so bright, or that, but it's always a fun surprise.
Yeah, of course, even if it's sunset, it's going to play differently with the glass. And the pieces of glasses are, do you like find specific types that you like better than others? Or is it, I don't have any background really in stained glass to
Yes.
know, but just having to figure out the colors or the textures or I guess it's a texture or swirls or things like that you would work with. How did you just kind of begin to play and find all those different pieces to use?
A lot of glass hoarding. It would be the answer.
Glass hoarding. I love it.
So you pick out like I don't actually make the colored glass. So the color, you buy sheets of color glass and then you cut them up and then grind and solder them all together. But yeah, so I have a whole lot of glass and I have like bins of scrap. They're all like color coordinated. I mean, it's very organized. And so when I'm looking for a specific thing, I'll get out all of those things and just have them piled around me until I'm finding out all of the perfect little colors that like complement each other and that will look nice to that or not, I think that's like 90% of it is like choosing the right color because that's the trickiest part, like when it's finally up in the window.
Was there color theory, I guess in the architecture side of things? Was that something that they touched upon there in the art side of it, or was it more material based in that sense?
The first couple years, there definitely was some color theory when we were doing like watercolors and all of that. Definitely a big part of it. Later on, not so much, but
Sure.
absolutely,
Yeah, I
played
can
a
see how
huge
that
part of
helped.
it. Yeah, definitely gained a lot of knowledge from that. So like that, I think that's something I'm pretty good at this point. Yeah,
Because you have to find the colors that go together that
yeah,
complement, and
compliment.
then
Yeah,
or the
exactly.
glass even maybe could be opaque, more
Yeah.
opaque than another piece, and it might not look right next to that. And there's so much that goes into the design, I guess, of the pieces. Have you done anything really big in scale? Like I haven't didn't notice any sizing on some of the stuff. Like has there been anything that's just been like this took forever or do you keep it usually like smaller pieces?
I mean, I've done a door, so like a entry door, so that's pretty big.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a few I mean, I'm looking to my left to see like that's about like 3 feet by 2.5 feet. Those are pretty big, especially with the level of detail. So I'm always choosing like really intricate patterns, and so they take months to finish.
I was gonna
So
say that's gonna pay a while.
yeah, it is a very slow, tedious. Yeah, I think people either love it or hate it for that reason. But yeah, again, that was right in my wheelhouse.
Do you ever cut yourself on the glass?
Every single day.
Really?
That
Oh my gosh.
that is I mean, they're never big cuts, but, like, I've had people reach out like, "I'm afraid of blood. Is it gonna be" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, again, they're, like, very minor little like, when you're grinding the glass, you're, like, smoothing off the edges on a grinder and just turning the glass, it's usually, like, the first couple layers. It's not all the way through, but, it's going to happen." Yeah, that is just part of it.
It's gonna sting. That's why I was wondering if if people in stained glass, if they use specific kind of gloves where I was
They
imagining,
should.
okay, they should. I was wondering though, like, would that
Yeah.
hinder the placement or
It does for me just because I'm working with so much smaller pieces than I think most people are typically working with that I need that like extra ability to like hold on to a thing where if when you put gloves or some other tool, it's harder to work with. So it would actually take longer.
is there like anytime there's glass on the floor that you might step on? I mean, that just kind of like living in this glass world seems a little dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's always glass on the floor. There's shoes required. Actually, when I started out, I was in an apartment with carpet and I did it inside and I just had, I was barefoot all, all the time. Didn't ever have really a problem with that. But yes, like safety is important. Do as I say, not as I
Right,
do.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, once you get to that point, what's going to happen, where things are going
Yeah.
to be and fall. But I just, yeah, I've not, like I said, I don't have any experience in the glass space. And I find that really fascinating to, play with the light so much and the glass and those textures. And, everything you do is just like, it's just really beautiful. And I think it's the intricate, like the detail that I personally am always drawn to. And not that things have to be super detailed, but I kind of, just enjoy that as well. And just the realism and so many of the pieces too. And, I just really find it amazing.
I think that's like really been a big goal of mine also, just coming from a thing that didn't really respect like crafts or that. And I think again, like I said, stained glass has primarily been put in that bucket. And so for me, like trying to like maybe transition that out into like more of a fine art where it is appreciated greater than like, it has been in the past for sure has been a goal of
And you mentioned your parents or your family that, have done beautiful works of art, but they don't consider that or themselves artists. Do you think that might have been something that, was passed down to them as well, where it wasn't seen as, the fine art that it can be or is.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure I think that probably is common for a lot of people, right? It's like, oh, it's this thing, I mean, or maybe just like, oh, that little hobby he does, or that kind of thing. It's just like it's fun to do on the side, but it's not a real, it's not a real job. You gotta get a real job,
Yeah, because it's like you obviously can make a living and be an artist. It's probably that as parents, oh, I want them to make sure that they can
Oh,
survive, and if we encourage that, will they,
yes, I get that fully. Again, I wanted to go to art school when I graduated, and again, my parents were just so nervous about that what's that actually gonna like do? We need her to be able to to support herself and be okay. So that's where like we like, the compromise was like, well, I'll go to architecture school. Well, I'll get that, and then again, but I know, which I'm so glad I did.
Oh, it's this different background path that has led you to where you are, but also plays into what you're doing now and whatever you're studying that will definitely apply to what you're doing now. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really, unique background for that. And, so many people they'll also go, choose education. I'll be an art teacher, which is amazing. And to be very patient in that field. But,
Yeah.
it is, like, how are we, going to make money at this? And it's just exciting that people can see that, you're on Instagram, see that you're doing it, seeing the commission work. And it doesn't have to be, I'm imagining it doesn't have to be like, today I'm going to do that. Like you said, you had other jobs, you worked into this space and
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
You had to build into that.
Yes.
And I think that's definitely important. And, if listeners are trying to imagine like, well, I'll just go do this tomorrow. It obviously takes a lot of work
Oh,
and
yes.
background. And
Absolutely.
on the business side of things, do you find yourself doing a lot is it equal business to creation, or is it, is there a 75-25%? Like, how much business are you like in the background, like sales tax or invoices or all that?
There is a lot of that. I think that's the part that a lot of people don't realize when you like jump into this. You're like, I'm just going to be able to do this. And it's like, oh, wow. Well, probably half. It's probably half and half that, like, marketing. Luckily, my husband is very supportive. So he takes care of all the financial part that I really want no part of. So, yes, I'm very lucky with that. He helps me there. But yeah, there is a lot. There's a lot, probably about 50-50. If you're doing it full time, if it's just, something on the side, it's a little easier. But when you make that jump, it's a real business at that point. So yeah, you got to treat it as such.
I am an artist. This is my business now. But it's so good to have family that supports what you're working on. I can't imagine how it would be if you're trying to do art where people might not think art is, lucrative or a, job, and then not to have that support. I think that's amazing to have that and to find the people in your life that, like you said, support you and then say, hey, you're an artist, like
Right.
put yourself around people who are supportive of that. And then as you've gotten into the arts in this way, have you found like a network of other stained glass people around online or locally that you are connected with?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, if you don't have people like in your life directly, like if you don't have supportive parents or friends, like for me, I know like social media and all that is kind of like I think it is what you make of it. And so like for me, especially, I surround myself with people who are very artistic. I follow those kinds of things, anything really uplifting. And so I've been nothing but very lucky so far, at least with the people I've had like on social media. Like for instance, you've reached out to me, which was lovely. Yeah. So I've just been very lucky, and I would really encourage that.
That's wonderful. Are there like stained glass guilds that, of that you're a part of, anything like that?
Not at this point, yeah. I mean, it's a pretty small community. I mean, it took me years before I even realized there was a place about 30 minutes away from me where I could go buy glass like in person. So I was ordering all of this online, which is definitely tricky when you can't see it in person before you buy it. So, yes.
Right, right. How does that look?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why, I mean, I love it. I mean, obviously, there are lovely artists that I'm connected with that do do works, similar to what I do. But for the most part, especially locally, it's much older women that run these things. And so that's where I think it's exciting to see younger people getting into it, which I've seen more and more of online as I like network. And
Yes, to have, to continue it, to have it, come back around or have a new life,
right.
or have interest in it because it is so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think most people associate it still with like churches and like more of those kinds of, it's just like, oh, that's what you do until you kind of show them. You're like, oh, okay, I didn't know you could do stained glass like that. It's just not what you typically think of when you think of stained glass.
Do you ever like look back and just kind of, study or, look into the, Renaissance stained glass work and how they did anything with their pieces or how they created it at all? That would be something that I'd be like, oh wow, what is, or looking at churches.
For sure. I mean, we went to France on our honeymoon, and so we definitely went in lots of churches just to look at all of that. So, I mean, for sure, for sure. I mean, a lot of that is like leaded glass, which isn't quite what I do, which is it's a little more structural, so they're bigger pieces. So I do the more Tiffany style.
Yeah.
Which allows for the really intricate work.
Right. They have to have something that stands up to nature for hundreds of years.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
To sit in the window as a piece. Wow, that's really cool. I've always seen, older buildings with glass that kind of starts to run. I don't know what, like settle somehow in the window panes. Is there some kind of a, glass, I guess in the past, was that something that would have done the same thing? I don't know if you know that or not, or if that would be something that would happen. I'm just curious now that I'm thinking about it. I wonder how glass, slowly liquefies and settles down. I wonder if that's something that happens with smaller pieces or not.
Not that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I'm just curious how that would last over time. Like, the old pieces, the old Tiffany pieces or lamps. I wonder if things change over time.
They should last I mean, if they're well taken care of, then they're made to last a long time.
Is there anything that frustrates you besides, getting cut with making glass, or is there anything that you're like, I kind of want to just go work on the nature pieces, like just kind of take a break? Is there anything that just you want to just reach in and like change something about it as you're working?
I mean, yes. I mean, it's such a tricky medium to get right, especially with the colors and all of that. And so like I'll have like a whole table just piled with different colors of glass, and I'm like working, and I'll cut one and I'll think it'll be right, and then I'll look back and I'll be like, that's not quite right. So I'll take it out and then I'll like cut something different. And then, at a certain point, it's just like, okay, this is getting me nowhere. And I'm again, when I start getting in my head and overthinking it, that's when I'll go to a nature thing.
Yes.
I'll pause, walk away. Yes. And then come back.
Right. Like, so if you pause from the work of art, do you go and work on other art that's not the work of art?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Ever come back to like, okay, now that I've I've done the art here, I'm going to come back to the art over there. I love it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think to wrap things up, what advice would you give your past self, since it's such a unique path from where you've come from? What advice would you give yourself?
I already know this answer because for me, I would say play more, have a little more fun. Everything was so serious. And now that's where like, I really try to focus on the joy. To like, even on your last question, it's like when I start overthinking it, it frustrated. It's like this is no longer enjoyable in this moment, and it should be. And that's where beautiful things happen in those moments. So that's where I'm trying to get better and better at like walking away when I get frustrated, so that I can come back and put the right energy into it, so that it feels right when it's done.
I think it's amazing to remind ourselves, where we live in this little blue dot in the universe, try not to be so serious about everything.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Especially with the arts, because it's something that people will, like you said, they'll see how you enjoyed it, and they can see that in the piece, and if it was a struggle or if you're forcing something, they can see that too. And it's really amazing that people can kind of see both ways and to bring that joy into it. So I think that's wonderful. Where can people find you online? We mentioned Instagram, but what is the your handle for that?
It is Hambone Glass. So Instagram, Hambone Glass. I also have a website that is just hamboneglass.com. And then, Facebook, same thing.
I'll also link your Etsy shop too in the show notes and make sure people can find you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. I really enjoyed talking about the glass since I hadn't had any experience with that. And it's such a beautiful art form, and the way you are very intricate with things and just your backstory, just such a fascinating and joyful kind of experience to share here with us. So I wanted to thank you for, sharing about your art and your creative journey. And I'm hoping that people will follow you and make sure that they see all the pieces that you've done, since this is audio only. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a delight, and I appreciate it.
Oh, wonderful. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others so we can reach people who might like a little bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. I'm Becky Gehrisch, and until next time, happy creating. Hey there, creative minds. Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit BooklingMedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.